Now, I'm going to talk about shoot weeks, because I've been assessing budgets for AFC for about a year, and I see shoot weeks, 4 even, 5 or 6 weeks, and they're 5-day weeks. And look, I know that there's this thing with HD, that it's faster, but it's still, I don't know that it's so good for the actors though, or the director. If you're trying to, do something in, 5 or 6 weeks, you're going to be doing overtime. Crew are going to get cranky, I mean, I know it's possible. I think the Jammed was only 3 weeks, or not many weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. But I just want you to think about it. I mean, I know it seems that the industry's changing because we're not shooting on film anymore, but I'd hate to see us all trying to make films eventually for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, because that's sort of what's happening. It's just, and stunts and travelling, car shots, and they all still take time. Like, it's not going to be faster because it's HD and not film. You still, in order to make your set safe, you have to prep stunts really, really, really well. Otherwise, you get into trouble. A lot of people ask me, what we did with wages, and the wages for all our crew were never award, but they were never obviously fantastic, but they were somewhere in between. And the thing about wages is always to have your heads of department on the same, and never, then your next level on the same, and then like your entry levels, your runners, secretaries. I mean, just one way of doing it is just looking at the classification levels as a guide, and then add 500 on all of them or whatever. The other thing is obviously your fees, above the line fees, can't be very high either. And although Vertigo, we struggled from film to film, the company did survive 10 years and it made some pretty good films, I think. So even though our wages weren't high, I think, the crew knew that as well. So it just meant that we were all on an even playing field. As an assessor, I can actually see, in a budget when, I can tell when the producer hasn't done the budget. I can see where the holes are. And if you're going to work in low budget, or you're going to keep working in low budget, as a producer, I really, really recommend that you learn how to budget properly. And if you don't know, learn. Like, do courses, do work experience with someone that does, and work it out that way. I see the gaps in most producers' knowledge is in the post path, the DI path, delivery items, and sound editing, mixing. Often there'll be sound editors and no mix, or a mix that's a stereo mix, and delivery items is never, people don't understand them. And, I know delivery items change, but you should be able to get lists of delivery items from somebody, So I learnt how to do budgets just by doing draft after draft after draft. I really do think if you're working with a writer who's not writer-director, I think it's useful for them to see a budget at least, at least know, just basically. They don't have to, know how to budget, but I think that's really useful. And I really think producers should sit down with their director and go through the budget a couple of times, just so that he or she knows where the money has to go, particularly with post, So yeah, and just another point on budgets is don't budget any luxuries, no entertaining, no wrap party, no crew t-shirts, none of that's on the screen. And if there's contingency left, in the last week, go and chuck $1,000 on a bar somewhere. And all right, so obviously there are disadvantages to working with low budgets. The crew will get tired of average wages, and the boy departments do get sick of not having bells and whistles to play with. Often the actors do suffer because there's not the comforts. It is very hard work because everyone's multi-skilling. And the fees are low for you, for the producer and director. But I think the advantages outweigh. It is easier or faster to finance, particularly if you're working with new directors. It will be faster to get a low budget up than a big budget, you know. We had more freedom because the budgets were low. There was less interference by any of the investors. Okay, so the other advantages are you work with the same people, and that's really good because you're not reinventing the wheel all the time. You know their personalities. Like, I know Rolf's crew really well. I know which ones are going to grumble about certain things. Low budget filmmaking is an attitude and a philosophy, and it's very, very rewarding. Like, you've got to go into this together and really embrace it. You need to work as a team. And don't try and fit a mid to high budget film into a low budget model, because it's just going to be a nightmare, I think, particularly for the actors and the director. And be sensible at the script stage. So just as a producer, look out for really expensive things. And it could be that you have a real set piece in the script and you put money there, that's fine, but just watch all the expense, you know, through the drafts. Yeah. And if you're doing drafts from really early on too, and you keep revising them as the script is revised, that's really useful as well.